Welcome to this explainer. Listen, if you're flying the Bombardier Q400, you already know that mastering the Flight Management System, or FMS, is absolutely critical for a smooth operation. I mean, especially when air traffic control decides to throw you a curveball, right? So today, we're diving straight into the step-by-step Q400 FMS approach logic, specifically focusing on what happens when you're tasked with holding during approach operations. We're going to break down the exact logic, the rules, and the cockpit flow you need to know. The goal? To reduce your workload and completely eliminate any confusion during a busy approach. Okay, let's get a mental pre-flight checklist going. Here is the exact sequence of technical rules we're mastering today. 1. FMS holding setup. 2. Nav page 1 banners. 3. Normal activation versus bypassing. 4. Active holding and approach modes. And finally, 5. Hold termination rules. Let's jump right in. Section 1. FMS holding setup. Let's figure out exactly where the holding setup information lives in your system. Because, let's face it, knowing where to look is half the battle. So, the Q400 FMS brilliantly organizes its data based on what the aircraft is actually doing. If you need the general, detailed holding pattern setup, you're going to look in the en route portion. But, and this is a big but, if you are holding while you're in VNAV descent mode, well, that specific logic is tucked away in the VNAV portion. It's a pretty simple division, actually. A great way to remember this is that en route covers your general journey, while VNAV handles the specific vertical descent details. You've got to keep that separation crystal clear in your mind. Moving right along to Section 2, Nav Page 1 banners. Let's see how all of this builds when we start looking at the visual cues the FMS feeds us. When you've got both the holding pattern and an approach armed, you're going to see either the hold armed or the APPR armed banner pop up on Nav Page 1. And here is exactly how that sequence plays out in the real world. First, when a holding pattern is programmed at a waypoint in the approach transition, the FMS enters the hold and boom, hold armed displays. Then, the moment that holding pattern is exited, the approach mode arms automatically and APPR armed will annunciate. To memorize this effortlessly, just use the HAAA trick. Hold armed to approach armed. Say it with me. HAAA. That's the literal chronological sequence you'll see on Nav Page 1 when navigating these transitions. All right, Section 3, Normal Activation versus Bypassing. Now this is where it gets really interesting, because the pilot gets a very clear choice as the aircraft approaches the hold. First off, what even is a normal approach activation in this system? Well, it happens when two very specific conditions are met. The approach label has to sequence through the TO waypoint, and the aircraft must be inbound to the runway. So the crucial takeaway here is that normal activation requires sequencing right through that TO waypoint while you are physically inbound to the runway. If both of those boxes aren't checked, you're just not getting a normal activation. But what if ATC changes plans and you suddenly don't want to hold? If you decide not to enter the holding pattern, you need a fast way to tell the FMS to just drop it. Just remember this trick. To maneuver away from the hold, use the disarm hold function, which is located right there on the maneuver page. Think of it as your no thanks button. It makes perfect logical sense, right? To maneuver out of a hold, go to the maneuver page and hit disarm hold to scrap the holding pattern entirely. Section 4. Active holding and approach modes. Now we need to cover the strict rules for what happens when holding and approach modes are overlapping in the FMS. The logic here is incredibly systematic. First rule, either holding or approach mode may be active at any given time, not both. But here's the absolute crucial operational rule you need to know. If your approach mode is armed at the exact time a holding pattern is activated, it just patiently remains armed until the holding pattern is exited. So while you're maneuvering the Q400, just remember that the system doesn't forget your approach. It literally just puts it on standby while you handle the hold. And finally, Section 5, Hold Termination Rules. We've reached the end of our cockpit flow, where we determine exactly how the FMS terminates the hold. So the Q400 FMS features both automatic and manual termination for holding patterns. But how do you actually know which one is going to happen? Well, to figure out if it'll be manual or automatic, you just have to check the waypoint depiction on either your navigation or your flight plan pages. The system literally shows you what it plans to do visually. Let's zero in on when automatic termination actually kicks in. Automatic termination specifically applies to procedural holds that are usually used as course reversals rather than procedure turns. Here is your memory trick for this rule, and it's a great one. Auto reverse. Just lock that phrase in, auto reverse. If you're using the hold to reverse course, the FMS knows it needs to automatically terminate once that maneuver is wrapped up. And how exactly does the FMS communicate that it's ready to auto-terminate? The visual proof is dead simple. You will see the next sequenced waypoint lined up right after the hold on your nav page. When the holding pattern automatically terminates, the system instantly queues up that next waypoint. That way, you have zero doubts about where the plane is heading next. So we've walked through the exact step-by-step logic the Bombardier Q400 FMS uses during approach operations, from the HAAA banner sequence to bypassing on the maneuver page, all the way down to the auto-reverse termination rule. I want to leave you with this final thought to really cement your FMS mastery. Next time you're in the cockpit and you see that next waypoint listed right after the hold on your Q400 nav page, will you instantly recognize that an automatic termination just occurred? Trust your memory tricks, trust those screen depictions, and as always, fly safe.